Well, welcome back, everybody. Before we jump into today's show, I wanted to throw it out there. We are talking with artist Dave Avanzino. He is a Disney artist, and his artwork is very unique in the way he designs it through three-dimensional paper and also through some of the words that he designs. And we kind of jump in and start talking about his artwork right away. And if you haven't seen it, it's beautiful artwork, but it's a little bit different. And it might help to maybe go to his Facebook page, Dave Avanzino Designs. His last name is spelled Avanzino, or go and just Google his name, and plenty of pictures of his artwork will come up. For those of you who have traveled on or sailed with Disney Cruise Line, as you walk by the gallery, I'm sure that you are going to recognize it right away, and it's just some beautiful artwork. So I thought that since we jump right in and start describing it, sometimes it's hard to translate that visual image over a podcast, and I thought it might help everybody out there that wants to maybe jump on his page first, take a look at it, and then listen to the podcast. So with that being said, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and let's jump into today's show. Well, hello, and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, and I'm excited today to bring our guest on board. He is an artist down in the Southern California area, and today I'd like to welcome to the show Dave Avanzino. Did I say that right?
You did.
Well, welcome to the show, Dave. I'm excited to have you on today.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here.
Just to give a quick background on Dave, he has created, he's an artist down in the Southern California area. He's created numerous one-of-a-kind limited and open edition pieces for Disneyland. And by the way, I love the Haunted Mansion stuff. I'm a big fan of that.
Oh, thanks.
And Walt Disney World, Disney Cruise Line, and just doing a little research and looking at your stuff. He typically works, and correct me if you want to jump in and say anything, you typically work in 3D style that creates some mixed media paper sculptures and a shadow box frames, and I think those are really cool.
Thanks. That's as accurate as a description as I can give.
And then the other thing that I think is really neat is the words, and you've kind of created your own different alphabets, and we can talk about that in just a little bit.
Yeah.
But words where you have created the alphabet so that each letter is a different character almost, with different textures, colors, and materials, and then you use that to kind of set up different words like magic or dream or wonder, right, as far as Disney Cruise Line goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of the background of, and then you also work in set scenery as well.
I do. I've done theater stuff for years and always loved that. Taking a little break from it, but because it's pretty demanding work, so had taken the summer off.
Okay, well, let's just jump into it. How did you start off as an artist, I guess? Where did that start from, and how did you find your unique form of artwork?
Well, I mean, I'd always done art as a kid, but then like around junior high, kind of got into music, and so did that all through high school, while kind of doing art on the side, but was more into music. Went to college originally as a vocal performance major, and I always say 2 years in, I just realized it just sucked all the joy out and made me hate it.
Uh-huh.
So it was a great lesson, like, don't do this professionally, just do it for fun. And so at that point, I thought, well, I'd gotten a job at a small ad agency, kind of hand lettering stuff. And I thought, okay, I really like this. So kind of changed my major, finished up with just a general degree in art, was going to do graphic design because that's what I was doing at the time. But just wound up leaving with a general art degree. And I kind of found at the time whenever I had a project, I really just liked three-dimensional stuff, like more than just painting. Like I just liked the texture and color and depth, and that just was something for whatever reason I was drawn to. So kind of in the years after that, I did everything from murals to set design. I worked in the film and TV industry briefly. It's been a strange path, but at one point I kind of started doing – they were called textures, and what they were to me was like a – contemporary illuminated manuscript, those old Bible pages that the monks would hand letter with the scripty big letter and stuff. So I kind of developed a line of product, just things that I would make and sell to people. And then it was a publisher picked them up for a while and did a calendar and all this stuff. So I kind of had this style going, and then just was very fortunate to meet a picture framer that it turns out did all the work for Disneyland. And they just were very gracious people who introduced me to people as they would be in there picking up other stuff. And I realized this year it's been 20 years. Wow. I mean, I think it's a little bit longer than that, but that's like 1988. I can pinpoint a project I did for Tomorrowland where, I mean, literally was like, I think I handmade a couple of logos that we put in a mat that all these astronauts signed.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so it's like, wow, 20 years. Kind of doing little things like that, little gift pieces for people. And then I always tell a story because I always said my business strategy is, I don't think it was conscious, but I realized later in life it's, say yes to the job and then figure out how to do it. I always tell this story to the collectors because I think it's funny, where the framer had asked me over while this Disney buyer was in there one day, and they were framing this print of the mural in the Mr. Toad ride. And it's kind of baseball diamond shape where it kind of comes down to a point at the bottom. And so they had this custom mat made, and they didn't like these big spaces in the lower corners. So they brought me over and said, Dave, what would you do with this? And so I don't even know if I owned Photoshop at the time. I'd seen it. I was kind of aware of what it could do. But they had this crest from the ride, and it was like Mr. Toad's family crest, and then he was on the top. So it kind of made a tall rectangle. And I'm thinking, okay, we need this to be a square. So I don't know why. I just start saying things. I say, well, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to digitally edit that frog off. I'm going to put the wallpaper behind it. I'm going to hand paint a second crest that matches it. This is Mr. Toad. And then I'm going to digitally put it over the same wallpaper, and we'll shrink these down, and we'll put them in little windows in the mat. And so when I'm telling this story, I always stop and I say, now, just so you know, I don't know how to do any of this. It's coming out of my mouth, but I know I can figure it out. And I did, and they loved it. And I got to go to this event, which I said they used to just do these fantastic events at Disneyland. And this one was like in the little courtyard behind the castle. So it was all like after, I must have been, it was after hours, or that part where the park was just closed off. But there's like, cheese trays in the line for Snow White, just really odd. There's food everywhere, drink. I said it was like you could have a glass of wine and ride Peter Pan. I said it was something like, you're like, I shouldn't be doing this. Like, this doesn't seem right. But, and then they had a live auction that I wound up contributing to a piece on. And so it just was kind of this whole new world for me. Like I had no idea that this existed with collectors and all this stuff. And so I went and got to meet the head of that department. And so he gave me a meeting. And so I went in and I said, well, and I had painted this image. And I said, well, I'm not really a painter. Like, I do paint, but I think I brought one of my scripture pieces and said, this is kind of more what I do, this dimensional stuff. And so he said, well, our next event is Cinderella Ball. I think it was the 50th anniversary. And he says, what would you do? And I said, well, give me a pencil. And I sketched things up. And so that was the first time. Then they bought like a limited edition from me. I think I made 5 of something and one of a kind. And then I got to go to that. And, that was, I said it was kind of like embarrassing when I look back, because I think I met like John Hench, and I did not know who he was.
Wow.
Like when you kind of embarrassingly talk to him, and then later you realize, oh my gosh, that's who I actually talked to. And, Alice Davis was there and all these people. And so, then that kind of opened, that was sort of my first thing that I did was for some years they would do these events, and they do 2 or 3 a year, and I'd make a limited edition for it. And that was it. I got to go and I met people. And then eventually, about my 3rd or 4th buyer, the lady just said, well, how come you don't make things we sell every day in the park? And I said, well, I don't know. I said, I would be more than willing to do that if you're interested. And so then there was that for a while. And then when the 50th came around, that's when we got in this thing of like, let's see if we can mass produce something. And, my stuff's a little harder to mass produce than a painting. And we had one attempt that we weren't happy with. So we tried it one more time, whereas that was sort of like a resin plaque. It said Peter Pan, and it was just like one solid lump. that had the, like you said, like the little letters, like the P was Peter Pan and the E was a teddy bear, but it didn't convey the real character of my work when it was all just this this solid block. So I said, well, what if they do the letters individually and put them on like I do? And then so that's when we first kind of did Disneyland and Adventureland and Frontierland and the original, or all the lands of the park. And so once we figured that out, then I could do like Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion and Tiki Room. And so for some years there was these different attraction shadow boxes that came out. And then I took that and said, what if we did a custom program where people could design their own name kind of based on, this alphabet and attractions from Disneyland, where the A is a Matterhorn and, the N is from Tiki Room or something. So we introduced that at one of the D23 expos, which are all a blur. I think it was the second one, and they started around $500 each, so they're not an inexpensive product. And I always remember my buyer came up to me and said, if you sell 10 of these, I'll be happy. And we could have sold 51.
Wow.
And I finally had to cut it off about 30 because I'd never made them and I didn't know how long they were going to take. And we only had 90 days to get them to the guest. And so it was like, I got to stop. So and then that's done really well. I still sell those to this day. And so at one point I had done a couple. So I kind of reached out to the cruise line.
Before we jump into the cruise line, just for those who haven't seen your work yet, and it is amazing. I love what you do. As far as the alphabet goes, just to kind of explain that a little bit more. So I guess what Dave is saying here, or what you're saying here, Dave, is that like for Haunted Mansion, like the H actually is. I'll let you say what the H is because I don't have them memorized necessarily.
Now, is this the attraction shadow box?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I did that one. Yeah, the H, I don't have it in front of me either.
Oh, no.
But I'm pretty sure that was like the iron, the wrought iron railing, like kind of that scrolly green patinaed railing. I know like one of the U's was the gargoyle with the candles, and like the S at the bottom was kind of a semi-transparent ghost, and O of course was Madame Leota. So it was just, I said, that's what's fun. It's just kind of I actually got to walk through the Haunted Mansion, which was pretty cool. It was the only thing that was bad about it was later in the day when I realized I forgot to take my picture inside it, which I kicked myself to this day. So yeah, I just kind of snapped pictures. I got to go stand literally right in front of that floating candlestick.
Oh wow!
And take a picture of it, and so then I go home with all my pictures, and I'm like, okay, what does this look like? What letter can I make out of this? And it's just really fun. It's a fun thing to get to do.
And that's what I think is kind of cool. Is like each one of the letters in the alphabet has kind of a characterization of that ride or whatnot, and so then as you put the word together, you're kind of getting that whole kind of sense of the Haunted Mansion and from different aspects on each letter, I guess, and that's kind of neat.
Yeah.
And
then the custom program pulls some of those letters. Now, like the custom program came more of out of the land shadow boxes where I did Fantasyland and Frontierland and Adventureland, and had to add to that, of course. Now, when I first designed the custom program, I figured, the two biggest attractions with the fan base, I think, are Haunted Mansion and Pirates. So what I wound up doing as a way to give everybody who got a custom name a chance to have those is I kind of created two alphabets where you can have any letter in your name sort of be this Haunted Mansion alphabet, which is mostly just, it's kind of like the corridor wallpaper with a little border of sort of that green railing. And then the Haunted Mansion font is your letter. And then the pirate one was kind of based on the captain's quarter sign as you come around the bend where, it's just sort of like a wood plank that looks like it's had the letter carved into it and there's a little gem in it. So that was my way of kind of in the custom version, like everybody can have Haunted Mansion, everybody can have Pirates, and then I added sort of a castle font in there too. But then there are some other Haunted Mansion letters if you happen to have those in your name. Like for an O, you can have the logo, the little round or oval plaque at the front.
Mm-hmm.
You can have that as your O, or you can have the clock face with the 13 on it. And so then people go through and they if they like Fantasyland, it's all kind of designed to like, what are the attractions you like the best? And, I have a little, once people place their orders, or pick their letters, then we kind of lay out sort of a paper set and they get a chance to see what it's going to look like and make some changes and stuff. And then I take them home and when I'm making them, they're all sorts of different materials. There's a couple of molds that I cast out of plaster, but then there's other letters I sculpt out of clay every time.
Wow. And
bake and hand paint, and then some are painted wood. Some are, most of them are different kinds of paper and materials like that. But every one is handmade, so they're a little involved, but they're a lot of fun.
So it seems like this is kind of a perfect fit for you. You start off with your kind of artwork with like the lettering, like you talked about with kind of the ancient monks and stuff like that you see like in the Bibles, and it kind of floats right into Disney, where you can kind of play around with the different scenes. Growing up living in Southern California, did you have a Disney background? Did you guys go to the parks, or was this kind of new to you, I guess?
Yeah, I kind of grew up in Northern California. I actually grew up in Napa, but we had family down here. And so we would come and stay at a family's house in L.A., usually around Thanksgiving or other, during the summer, while they were on vacation somewhere else. But it was great because we'd come down and we'd go to Disneyland. I don't remember going there a lot, but I posted some pictures on my page recently from like 1970. I think I was like 6 years old, so I mean, we definitely were there. I remember the ticket books and, I have like some memories of like the Tiki Room and the Haunted Mansion and things like that. So, and then, I remember going when I was older, did a grad night and actually sang there a couple of times, once with a group from high school. And, so definitely like have memories of it. I would say, and my goal when I moved down here, because I moved to go to Cal State Fullerton. Mm-hmm. I thought, I'm going to work there. Like, that's where I'm going to get a job. So this is another story I tell to collectors because it gets a big laugh. Where I went to this interview and I was about 19 or something, and they interviewed like 3 people at a time, and I just thought, it's kind of a slam dunk, like, clean cut kid, I'm going to be at Disney.
Right.
And this guy just looks at me, like not the other 2. He just looks at me and he says, "Tell me something negative about yourself." And seriously, it took me 30 years to find out, like, what are people looking for when they ask that question? And I finally got an answer from an HR guy, and he says, well, he said it's a way to backhand compliment yourself. You're supposed to say, well, I'm a perfectionist. I work too hard. I'm too happy all the time. Something like that. Uh-huh. Not me. I was, I guess, brazenly honest and told the guy that I got really bored with repetitive jobs.
Oh, no.
And so, because I think I just come off a job where that was the case. And he said, I don't think I realized till later in the day. It's like, oh, that is kind of the kingdom of repetitive jobs, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So, but you know what? Everything works the way it's supposed to work, because I didn't get that job. I got a job in art. And that changed my major. It changed the course of my life, and was back there at some point doing what I do. So I think it was, always would have been nice to say, I worked at Disneyland, for 6 months or something. But, that didn't happen. And but I said, I think it all worked out the way it was supposed to work out. But I said, it's a funny story. It gets a good laugh because people, realize. I said, I like to think it made it on like a bulletin board. Like where somebody just said, "Can you believe anybody actually said this out loud?" like it became one of the classic responses to that line. I said the only thing I always say, the only thing I could have said that was worse, I think, is that I hate kids.
Yeah. I don't like to be happy. Maybe something like that
would have been just probably the only thing worse. Yeah.
Right. So kind of from there, you start with doing some of the different presentations that they have, like you said Cinderella's Ball, right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Cinderella's Ball. And it kind of leads you from there into, now once you started designing, the different pieces of artwork for around Disneyland, is that something that you like sign a contract with, or do you have to make so many different pieces a year, or how does that part of it work?
There's a lot of different contracts. There's sort of like, there's one that's kind of overarching to everything that just said, and it's usually for a period of time, and they'll kind of reissue it. That sort of like in general says, like, this guy can make Disney art. Now, it doesn't say I can sell it. Mm-hmm. I can't sell anything to anybody. I'm an independent contractor. my work is typically consignment. So Disney has to either buy it from me and resell it, or I have to be in an event where there's a Disney cash register ringing up the sale. But I have permission to use the characters and make stuff. Now, there also is like a contract for every single piece of art I make.
Okay.
If there's like in the past, previous buyer, she would give me a list and say, here's all the anniversaries coming up for next year, whether it was an attraction or a movie and something like that. And then I would kind of look it over and come back and say, oh, I'd love to do something for Pinocchio or this or that. And then she would kind of write up a contract for that year that would have all those things in it. And then I would do that. Now it tends to be a little bit more on like a piece by piece basis because I don't release a whole lot of new things every year. I'm like, I do about 4 weekends a year at Disneyland where I sell my custom names because I have the original custom name program, which is the theme park letters. And then I came up with a custom ticket book where it's like a replica paper ticket book, but it's your name instead of the EDCBA tickets. And then I took that and made a version where it's printed on a wood plaque that's like 8.5 inches tall. So I kind of like 3 custom programs, but then I bring in all of my sort of limited edition paper sculptures and deluxe prints and things like that. So I typically don't come up with new products unless I'm asked for it. Like if there's a special event, or typically for things like D23, they'd like something new. So,
okay.
But every time I do that, I give them all the information, and they have like like an individual. I think it's called a project work order, where it's sort of like, this is for this piece. So there's a lot of permission given and things like that. But anytime I want to, like, say I did just want to say, hey, I want to release this new piece, all I got to do is give them the information, and they give me the contract, and it's a fairly easy process.
Okay. So you start off at Disneyland, and then you've expanded onto Walt Disney World and Disney Cruise Line. How did you get involved with Disney Cruise Line? Is that it's kind of a separate part of the company, so you have to talk to different people for that, I guess?
Yeah, and okay. I said I think I reached out to them because, I thought, hey, I'd love to have some stuff on the cruise line.
Right.
And some of the people on there have come from the theme parks. Like I was, people kind of knew my work. So I'm not sure exactly. The first pieces I did were when the Dream and the Fantasy came out, like when those ships launched. I think the Dream was first, and they said, oh, we'd like you to do, sort of like an inaugural limited edition. So it was kind of this tall, thin piece that it was like the bow of the ship. And then there was Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy and Pluto, kind of little paper sculptures kind of on the bow of that ship. It was really tall and thin. And it was interesting because the mat was set about halfway back in the frame. And so the bow actually kind of poked out. Like it was still behind the glass, but It was sort of 3D. And I just found out there's some of those still available. I think they had found some in a warehouse, and I think they're back on the ship. And then when the Fantasy came out, I did Mickey and Minnie kind of in the lobby with a bunch of suitcases and, sort of this, that kind of Art Deco, the staircase and all this stuff. So did those. And then, we actually did a mass produced piece that kind of using that little letter thing that said cruise line. So I think we printed the word Disney, and then we did the word cruise line in little letters. Like I remember the S was the Mickey slide with his hand, and it was in a porthole. Like the frame was actually like a round gold porthole. And so they sold those for a while, and then they did come to me a few years ago and say, hey, could you do a custom name program for the cruise line? So kind of like the one I do for Disneyland. So I think I did it mostly. I think I had been on one cruise, but it was not enough to say, I'm going to go document the whole ship. So I relied a lot on people's photos from the internet just to find signage and different things like that. So I built a catalog of letters, and there's, I think, like 6 alphabets. There's like a pirate alphabet, a princess alphabet, a rope, and maps and flags, and then several other letter choices where people can build their name. And so I went on the Fantasy a few years ago to kind of launch that. And then since then, they've put it on the Dream. It's currently only available on the Dream, and it's the first time it's been sold without me there. So, I had to come up with sort of training for the cast members, and so they people order it, I get the orders, and then I mock them up digitally, which I do anyway, and sort of send a proof to the guest and kind of interact with them to sort of firm things up if there's any changes. So yeah, so it's done really well. So they might expand it to the other ships, and it might get kind of crazy.
Yeah, and what
I kind of want it, and I'm a little afraid of it, but.
Do they? So you said you've only been on one cruise with Disney?
I've done two. I did. The first one was on the Wonder, and it was several years. Well, no, I can tell you it was 9 years ago because my daughter turned 1 on the ship, which is not the ideal cruising age, by the way. But it was fun. It was a pirate event.
Okay.
Sort of like a special ticketed thing for any of the guests that wanted to pay extra. They had a couple of the minor actors from the movie and me. And so I did some special product for that and things like that. So that was different. And then I did the fantasy one a couple years ago where I sort of it was the first time they had done this custom name thing. And so I brought some other work and it was really neat. It was just, that was the first time I'd been on one of the newer ships, and they're all fantastic. They're just so beautiful. I'm hoping to go again.
Yeah, I know they bring, and I was just talking to somebody yesterday who'd done the Transatlantic. It's a 13-day cruise all the way across. Yeah, and I know they bring special guests such as yourself on board to do presentations and talk about. And I was just wondering if that was something that you had done as far as when you're on board. Did you get to do a presentation about your artwork, or was it mostly just selling it?
No, I did a little thing down in one of the lounges and had my little slideshow and a lot of the same information I'm telling you here, probably with just more with visuals.
Right.
But yeah, did a little presentation, and then they just kind of had me in the gallery at different times of the day, and there was 3 sea days, so those are sort of the big sail days, and then sometimes at night. So yeah, it was a great event. So I'm hoping to do another one.
Well, hopefully you're on there soon. And to find Dave's art on the cruise ships, we have not been on the Dream or the Fantasy yet, the big ones. We've only been on the Magic and the Wonder, but I know there's the hallway on the 4th deck. If you walk towards shutters there on the left, there's all the different artwork that is available on there. And that's where, if you're going to be sailing soon, look for Dave's work there on the cruise line. And one of the things that I really love about it, I'm looking at your picture of the Magic that I took while I was on board, and it sold out before I could buy it.
Oh wow!
But what I really love about your work, one, the 3-dimensional part of it, but also like the eye in Magic is actually the paintbrush from Animator's palette. So it's kind of a neat thing to look at, and it really brings you back to different experiences that you probably had on the ship while you were sailing on it. And I love that idea of it.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we had those are newer. We had done, in addition to the custom names, I think prior to those, the limited editions that they had asked me for. I think they had asked me for something, and I actually pitched it because I had wanted to do it, which is the sterns. How each of the sterns of the ship has the name of the ship, and then it has a character or multiple characters on it. On these stern limited editions, they were 25 each, and I'm pretty sure it's the Magic with Mickey and the Brooms is sold out, and the other ones are down to less than several on each one. So they're kind of a print of the back, the dark blue with the gold type, and then whatever the character is, it's painting the name on the ship. So like the Fantasy is Dumbo, and then there's Goofy painting and Donald with Huey, Dewey, and Louie. They're kind of cutting his rope, and so I just thought those were really fun. I remember when I saw those, I'm like, those would make a really good paper sculpture.
Yeah, those are amazing. Those are all 3D too.
Yes, they're all 3D, and they all have like custom mats, and so yeah, those are about done. And so they wanted something new, and so they came to me and they said, "What if you took your letters that we're using for the custom thing and just did the names of each ship?" And so we did that, and yeah, so I have all of those on each ship, and then I think they just reordered the Wonder. So, and we had done 10 of each one. So that tells me that okay, well those are selling. So it's a good problem to have.
How long does it take you to create each one of these? These are all handmade. So what kind of process is that like?
It's always the first one that takes a while. There's the design part of, especially when you're doing if you're doing the name of the ship, it's like, okay, I gotta get as much represented in there as possible. And they're only 5 letters or 6 letters. I think Fantasy has 7. So you don't have a lot of things to work with sometimes, but I want to make sure. Usually I have the logo type. I think the first letter of each one is the logo type of the ship, which is kind of this gold and red letter. And then I try to get a character in each one. And then when it's something really, really iconic, like you said, like the animator's palette, because and when you do your custom name, you have your choice of which paintbrush you want. Do you want the paintbrush from the Magic and the Wonder, or do you want the paintbrush from the Dream and the Fantasy? Because they're different. Mm-hmm. But I have both of those in there. And there's also the font, kind of that animation font on a little palette background that is the signage outside. And, the Magic and the Wonder are kind of rainbow color, and the Dream and the Fantasy are gold. So, so I give people those options of like, you can pick this letter, but which ships do you want to highlight? So when I'm doing the ship names, obviously I'm picking the one that's on that ship. But I'm thinking also this is a set of 4, and there's people that may want all 4. So I'm also trying to not replicate too much from ship to ship, or I'm thinking of them as a set, and like, well, if somebody has all of these, you don't want to use the same letter in each one. So it's a little challenge. But once it comes to making them, once I have everything solved, they're a little bit faster to make more of. I can make 5 of them in a couple of days, just because I know what I'm doing. It's just a lot faster. It's always that first one that takes a little bit of just solving all the spacers, solving all the, making templates, so I have templates so that I lay on it, that I know exactly where every letter goes. You're taking as much of the guesswork out so that when you're making more, like, how far apart were those letters, so it's that first initial thing that sort of slows it down. But after that, they're not too bad. And it's one of those things, I've done it for so many years. It's a little automatic at this point.
So I'm going to put you on the spot here. One of the big stories is Disney Cruise Line's coming out with 3 new ships. The first one's going to be out here in 2 years. Disney hasn't approached you and told you what the names are going to be yet, so you can start working on them, have they?
Actually, they have not. So, and if they did, I wouldn't tell you. But no, actually, they have not. So I'm hoping that would be, I said, if nothing else, it'd be fun to do another inaugural piece for each of those ships.
Oh, definitely.
It would be really fun.
Yeah, I think I couldn't imagine them not approaching you to make some pieces for the new ships, and I'm just kind of messing around with you a little bit with the names. But yeah, I'm kind of curious what it's going to be, just like everybody else is. So, I'm thinking about the 3-dimensional part and the work you've done on scenes, and that's all kind of 3-dimension too. Is that where your art kind of stemmed from, or did the scene work that you've done for like plays and whatnot, did that come after you really got into your artist work?
I think it's all connected. And okay. I said, over the years, people say, well, like, aren't you worried about somebody copying your work? And the thing I say is, I said, nobody has the same experience. Everybody has a different experience. So the art I make is this culmination of this bizarre career I've had, where it's, I did murals and graphic design and theater sets and TV sets and scenic painting and, mixed media artwork. Nobody else has that same path. So, somebody could take one of my pieces and pull it apart and maybe figure out how to make a copy of it. Mm-hmm. But that's different than making it, so I don't worry too much about, somebody could rip off the style. I mean, I haven't seen that. What is neat, though, is I come across things every now and then, like I think on Pinterest, where, somebody said, oh, I was really inspired by Dave Avanzino's work and I made this. And it's like, I think that's awesome. Or I met a young gal at Disneyland, I think last year, who came up and just said, oh, I saw one of your pieces here years ago and it just made me want to do this. And now she has this, Instagram account with all these great paper sculptures and, but they're not like mine. They're like her. And so, I think that's really neat. But I do think, I said, there was something that I just, like, even in set design, I said, I want to get to the point where I just design it and make the model of it. If I could make the model of it, that's what I love to do. And I will put like so much detail in that model and then hand it off and have somebody else make it. That's my goal. But there's times I've been doing sets and I said, oh, I'm going to make a model. And the director or whoever say, well, we don't really need that. And I'm like, but I want to make the model. Like, that's what I want to do because that's what's fun for me. So there is just something about that's always attracted me. And so I said I do think when I look back at this strange winding path of career choices I made, I think it's cool that it's like they're all represented in here. I talk about there's some letters I make for the Jungle Cruise in my Disneyland thing. Well, I could do like a digital print of that or whatever, but I don't. I like cut this piece of wood. I actually cut little grooves in it, like two planks coming together. I paint it green. I airbrush the white letter on it. I hand paint a red border around it. And then I sand it off because that's what it looks like on the sign. And then I stain it. And then I cut these little moldings. And it's like when I look at that piece, I'm like, that's a little set. Like it looks like a little model for a set. So I said all of those things. There's all of those weird, bizarre skills that all kind of come together in each of these pieces, which to me is my favorite part about it.
So each one of these is so unique. Do you have I hate to ask this question, and not necessarily a favorite, but is it hard to give them up once you design them, or what are your thoughts on that as an artist?
It is not hard for me to let something go. There's very few things in my entire career that I've made just for me. Uh-huh. I said it was funny that just a couple weeks ago I framed a bunch of pins from my 50th birthday at Disneyland that was like 4 years ago. And I've been sitting on them. Like I finally framed them. Like that's like a piece I made for me. It took me that long. But the bottom line is like if there's something I like so much, I can always make me one.
Right.
But what I've realized is the reality is other people are going to love it more than I do. So I love the fact that I get to make things that people want in their house. To me, that is just the greatest joy, that somebody else is like in love with this so much they're going to pay for it. And, and it's nice when I'm doing appearances. I just get a lot of people that come in just to tell me, hey, I got a piece of your work and it just makes me happy. That's like, what else could you ask for? But if I have to pick, there's a Pinocchio one I did some years ago. And it's funny because it actually goes back to that. There's a link to that very first Mr. Toad event that I did, where one of the pieces I made for it, well, they were auctioning off this piece. I think it was Disney Art Classics, and it was Geppetto's Toy Creations, and it was the little hutch full of toys, and it was this beautiful sculpture. That again, I didn't know this world existed, but they said, oh, we're auctioning off a painted one on this whiteware piece, and we've made this little wood base, and could you paint the words Geppetto's Toy Creations on this base? And I said, sure. So, it wasn't attributed to me or anything. It was just like, I just did this as a job. And so, but I loved that sculpture. I thought, because I love toys. I just grew up loving toys. And I'm just one of those things where every toy was hand painted and stuck on. And this thing's only like 7 inches tall. It was pretty impressive. So for years, I just remembered that. And then I had a friend one time that I told about this, and he was a huge Disney collector and all this stuff. And then one day this box just shows up at my door, and it's one of those. And they were like out of print, and he had found this thing and he bought it for me. And it was just really sweet. It sits in my office. I see it every day. So when it came time to do, I think it was the 70th anniversary of Pinocchio, I thought I want to do that hutch. And so what I wound up creating was this paper sculpture where the mat looks like the window frame of Geppetto's toy shop. Like you're looking in the window and you see this hutch full of toys. So again, every toy was separate, and the shelves were actually kind of like dimensional shelves where they went back in perspective. It was very hard to engineer. And it's all watercolory looking. It's just very warm, and it's one of only about 5 or 6 pieces that I have of mine in my office. But it just was my favorite. And so I've never sold the original, and I've never framed the original. When because I paint everything in pieces, so I wind up with like a file folder full of all these little paintings. And so I thought one of these days I got to pull that out and assemble the original. And then that's going to be about the only time I decide where, do I love this so much I want to keep my original? Or am I okay with the framed version I've had for years that I love? So that's about probably one of the only conflicted times I will ever have, is like, which one of these do I really want? But for the most part, I love the fact that other people want it. And I'd much rather they have it than I do.
And that's what I think is really neat about your work. Chris, one of our listeners who's been on the show, he's the one that kind of put you and I in touch. And boy, he has shown me all the artwork that he has collected from you. And I mean, he was excited to show it to me. And I think that's what's exciting about the work that you do. And, you know, just those memories that people have of places that they've been to, whether Disneyland, Walt Disney World, or on the cruise line, and what it brings back to them, and then sharing it with others to say, this is why I'm excited about it. And I think that that's what your artwork does. I love it.
Yeah, and I said I know Chris has bought a few things, and I went to a collector's house a while ago he had the largest collection of my handmade stuff I've ever seen, and it like went all the way up his stairway and around like 4 walls, and he like hunted this stuff down, and I would look at it and go, I made 4 of those. Like, how did you get one? You know, and it was like really just neat that like, man, this guy likes this stuff enough. He's actually like searching it out and, you know, buying it from people. And it was really special. So it's nice because I know how much these people love Disney, and I know how much Disney stuff is out there. So the fact that these Disney loving people buy my piece as their sort of memory or something like that just says a lot to me. And, you know, it's not everybody, because everybody likes different stuff. So, but the fact that I have enough people that's what they want, I think is really neat. So I value that highly. I always tell people it's, you know, I said I've done the starving artist thing, and that seems to sort of be done, which is nice. But I said, money aside, the nicest thing is that I get to make something that somebody wants in their house, you know, as their sort of memory or something that they treasure. That is, to me, what is the best part about what I do.
Do you have any advice maybe for somebody who's getting into the art world, or maybe somebody who has kids that are budding artists? Do you have any advice for them as far as how to kind of go down the career path? I know it's like a lot of other careers where, you know, it's just, I don't want to say luck, but, you know, being able to meet certain people along the way that kind of gets you to where you are. Do you have any advice for somebody that's starting to get into the art world?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and you know, I try to be really encouraging to people, because I said, you know, and I said I kind of use, like when I was talking about my music thing, where I said, you know, the one thing you got to realize is it may not be your career, but it doesn't mean that you don't do it. You know, like if you want it to be your career, definitely go for that. But you may get to a point where you realize, hey, this is just going to be something I do for fun, and that's great too. But the couple things I always tell people is, and I think it's true of anything you do, I use this in the context of art, is I said the thing you have to be comfortable with is that there is always going to be somebody better than you. And, you know, I said I go into the gallery and I look around at some of those paintings and I'm just like blown away. Like, I couldn't paint that. But there's 2 responses to that. And one is that you are inspired by it. And you say, wow, like I would love to paint like that someday. What do I have to do? What do I have to learn? And it inspires you and makes you want to try new things. The other response is that it cripples you and it makes you quit. And I said, unfortunately, like studies with kids who do art in elementary school, that is the pattern. Year by year, throughout elementary school, fewer and fewer kids enthusiastically do art. And it's because of that kind of comparison and competition thing that nobody's doing. They're doing it to themselves, where they say, oh, I'm not as good as that guy, so I'm out. So I think that's the thing you got to be comfortable with, is no matter how good you are, there's always going to be somebody better. But you got to remember, too, there's somebody looking at you saying, gosh, if I could just do what he did. You know, and I said that I look at those painters and think, wow, I could never paint like that. They could be looking at my stuff saying, wow, I could never think that up. I could never make that. So that's the one thing. And then kind of referencing what you said about people, as I said, you got to be nice to everybody. Like whether you're in school, you know, if you're studying, be nice to people, because you don't know what that person, you know, where that person's going to get a job. And not in a manipulative way, like I'm going to pretend to like everybody. But I said, it's like a lot of those connections you make. I said, I do what I do because I met a picture framer. That you just don't know who that person is that's going to change your life. So you really have to – it's a combination of, you know, they say it's all who you know. It's not all who you know, but that is a part of it. And you have to be able to do the job. But you don't underestimate the connections you make, and don't be so awful that people don't want to give you those opportunities.
Don't burn any bridges.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about how, as we kind of close out here, how people can get connected with you, Dave, and your artwork. It sounds like you actually do several shows a year down at Disneyland. And
yes.
I guess why don't you talk about where people can find you, and maybe if they want something, as you said, specifically made for themselves, where they can do that.
Yeah. Like I said, my limitation is I can only sell it when I'm at the park. So, and that's not always possible for everybody to get there. But I mean, fortunately, like Disneyland schedules me about every 3 months I'm at the Disneyana shop on Main Street, which is right next to the Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. That's kind of their main art gallery now. So I was just there June 23rd and 24th. I'm back in September. So it's typically, what would it be? March, June, September, and December are the 4 months I'm there. I typically don't post my dates until after Disney does, but those are typically the times I'm there. So usually about a month ahead of time, I'll start posting on my Facebook page, my Facebook page is Dave Avanzino Designs. You can look that up. And then I'm aspiring to be much better at Instagram. I've kind of neglected Instagram, but I am sort of embracing it now and trying to build a bigger following there. And that one, I'm just Dave Avanzino. So no designs, just Dave Avanzino. You'll find my page there. Now on that page, I think I do a lot of conversations with people through Facebook. They can just send me a personal message on my page, and I'm very good about responding there. On Instagram, you can click the email button and it'll send me an email. So I'm very accessible and very good about answering questions people have about what dates I'm going to be there, or, how, if they want to get a certain piece, I can say, well, yes, I'm going to have 2 copies of it there. And so they'll know they can show up and get one. So I try to be as helpful with that stuff as I can be within the limitations of what I'm allowed to sell.
Right. And to spell Dave's last name, it's Avanzino, and I'll make sure that I put a link to both your Facebook page and the Instagram page on the show notes of the podcast as well. So you can definitely go there and click it and find Dave that way as well.
That would be great.
Perfect. So, well, what's next for you, Dave? What do you have coming up next, and where do you see yourself going next?
Hopefully, just doing more of the same.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No. I said it's nice that I say after 20 years that they're still asking for stuff, and they're still asking for new stuff. So I'm very proud of that. I think in some regards, I've said that the handmade stuff I do, it's a blessing and a curse. The curse of it is that I'm limited in how much of it I can do compared to when somebody does a painting, like. That painting can be reproduced way more easily. So, I envy that a little bit sometimes. But the other side of that, the blessing part of it, is that I think there's a limited characteristic of my work that aids in its longevity. It is there's no way I can saturate the market
right.
because I can't physically make that much stuff. So I think part of that lends itself to being around a long time, because it just is a more limited product. It's not in the parks every day. It's kind of a special event kind of thing. So I like that about it, as hard as it is sometimes where I'm just to make everything by hand all the time. Now I am bringing in more products that I'm not making, that are made from my work. I've been doing the last 2 years, I've been doing the Epcot International Art Festival. And, I wanted to have some products in there that were like a lower price point than my handmade stuff. So I'm bringing in some frame canvases, and another company I work with does really interesting stuff where they actually print it on wood and, laser cut out different pieces that are stuck on top. And so I'm trying to make some interesting products that I can have as part of my collection that I don't have to actually hand make. So, and those have done really well. So trying to get some, different things in there for different people. And that was the other thing I was going to say, that, so in addition to my Disneyland appearances, and then I also do typically do Disneyland's or Disney California Adventures food and wine. So that's usually a couple other weekends a year. last November I was at Art of Disney in Disney Springs, and that may come about again this year. Once if those dates are firmed up, that will be promoted, and then hopefully there's a possibility I might be back at the International Festival of the Arts at Epcot next year as well. So they're having me come out there a couple more times a year, which is fun because I like Disney World too. So yeah, so I said it's juggling it all. I said it's the plate spinning, and you got to keep them all spinning and not falling off. But it's a good problem to have. I would say for a self-employed artist, I have too much to do, which is a great problem to have because I've had the other side of that, and it's not as fun.
Well, I'm glad things are where they are for you today. And you know what? I'm just going to go on a weird tangent here. You know what I think would really, with the opening of Galaxy's Edge coming, have you ever thought about doing like a Star Wars themed? Boy, you could probably go down a whole bunch of different ways with Star Wars too, with your alphabet and everything else.
Broached it a little bit. There are limitations with that because of licensing that already is in place. But I might be able to do something with the land, and I do have some concepts for that I need to throw out there to my buyer and stuff. So I think that may be where I might be able to participate, but not so much with the characters and stuff, but possibly because the land is in Disneyland, I might have a little bit of flexibility there. Because I thought it'd be kind of a neat paper sculptures to kind of do this sort of, snapshot of it, kind of all layered and stuff. So we will see.
Yeah.
I have to kind of throw that out there and see if they're interested.
With the 3D work you do, I think you could have a lot of fun with some of the different scenes and stuff with that. So
definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for coming on. Is there anything else that we missed talking about that you wanted to throw in there before we close it out?
If you're on the Dream, hunt down the custom name program. I know it lives in the gallery. So the gallery is up. The gallery is not part of the shop. So you have to find. It's kind of like one floor up on the atrium, one floor above the atrium, but kind of on the atrium. So if you would like a custom cruise line name, only available on the Disney Dream, and it's only available in the gallery when they're open. So hunt that down.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Dave.
Sure, my pleasure.
Sharing your experiences, and once again, thank you for the beautiful artwork which you create. And I encourage everybody, next time you're on the cruise ships, definitely take a look out, and if you're on the Dream, look for that custom-made lettering. So once again, Dave, thank you so much for coming on, and appreciate your time today, and I look forward to hopefully meeting you down in the parks or on the cruise line or seeing you soon.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Dave. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks a lot.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. I really want to thank Dave once again for coming on and sharing his experiences creating art for Disney Cruise Line and just the Disney company in general. It's just some beautiful pieces of art. And in the show notes, there will be links to his Facebook page and his Instagram page so that you can click on those so that you can follow along and see what he's doing and where he will be out and presenting his art for those of you, if you can't make it on the ship anytime soon, where you may be able to connect with him either down at Walt Disney World or at Disneyland. And Christy and I are doing the best we can to come up with all different kinds of topics outside of the trip reports, which we love doing. If you guys have any great ideas about future shows that you'd like to hear concerning Disney Cruise Line, feel free to reach out to me and Christy and kind of throw those ideas our way. We're always looking for just another angle to kind of bring that Disney Cruise Line magic to you each week. And if you know somebody else, if you've been enjoying our shows, and you know somebody else who would love to listen to it, we sure would appreciate it if you would share it with them. Our shows, it helps us get the word out in the Disney podcast community and also just in the cruising community in general. And if you'd like to come on the show and share your experiences, you can always reach out to Christy and I, myself at DCL Podcast on Facebook or on Twitter as well at DCL Podcast. You can always reach Christy at packyourpixiedust.com or Pack Your Pixie Dust on Facebook and Pack YR Pixie Dust on Twitter. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. We've got a lot of other fun ones coming out as the summer's continuing along. And if you're heading out on your next vacation between now and our next show, all of us here at the DCL Podcast would like to wish you fair winds and safe travels as you head out on your next adventure. Once again, thanks for coming back and taking a listen, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast.